Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on episode number 1 of my YouTube journey. I never thought I'd be doing a YouTube channel about card collecting. Never dreamed it in a million years. In fact, several years ago, I wasn't even collecting cards. I collected when I was younger and then got the bug again and got back into it in a big way and kind of gone bonkers over it and discovered YouTube and the card collecting shows on YouTube and some of the personalities, and really have enjoyed that. I've learned a lot. Watching people like Blue Jacket 66 go down and tell me about different sets and rabbit holes in the pre-war era and things like that really changed my collecting journey. Then you got people like Greg Miller, and I've become friends with him. Enjoy talking to him on a daily basis, enjoy his videos. He's so knowledgeable and he's so great at building community. And he's really been a mentor to me and pushed me into doing this, and I'm so glad he did. And we're gonna have a lot of fun with it. Mookie Chilson is somebody I talk to regularly, great guy. So what I've discovered is there's a real community there that I never knew existed. I started an Instagram page, it's probably been about 8 months ago, and really didn't even know what I was getting into, but that's where I discovered the community. I actually started making friends on there, guys I've really never met, but we talk all the time. We're in these little group chats, and it's just a lot of fun to share your cards and your pickups and laugh about different things and have the inside jokes that only collectors would understand. So that's what I enjoy. We're about to go over some cards, and Joe Jackson, Shoeless Joe, is my favorite pre-war player. Really enjoy taking deep dives into books and podcasts about him. Enjoy collecting his cards. They're kind of pricey, so it costs a lot of money to collect his cards, unfortunately. But I really enjoy getting them when I can. He doesn't really have a lot of playing day cards. I don't really know what the count is, but I've got 5 of them. So we're going to go over those here in just a second. So what we're going to talk about and do a show and tell period and talk a little bit about the card itself, a little about history of the set. And I love to talk about pop counts. I know that ain't everything, but when I show my cards on Instagram, I have people reach out to me and say, how many of those are there? And, people just don't know. I didn't know at one time. So I think that's an interesting part of it. And so I like to share that as I go through the cards here in just a second. But we're going to look at the 1913 Tom Barker game card. It's a really interesting card. We're going to go over the Cracker Jack 1915 card. There was the 1914 and the 1915. The 1914 is twice as scarce as the 1915. This is the 1916 Famous and Bar advertising back card. It's got the classic pose that he has on his Cracker Jack card, and there's the back with the advertisement on it. And then one of my favorites, and probably the most expensive card out of these 5, is my 1917 Boston Store card. It's another advertising back with the Boston Store advertising and the logo and everything on the back side. Very interesting card. I'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second as well, and tell you kind of a lot about the set and the story of the set and things like that and the different variations of backs. Then we have the 1919 W514 strip card. Some people don't like these cards. They think they're kind of ugly. And at one time, I wasn't a real big fan. It's really grown on me, though. The history of these cards, they're blank backs. And that is the 1919 set. So it's actually, if you want to collect Black Sox players, 8 out of the 8 Black Sox players that were banned, 7 of them are in that set. So some people, and I'm trying that myself, I'm trying to get all 7 of those cards and make a group out of them. So that's the cards themselves. A little bit about Shoeless Joe. It's kind of a rags to riches to rags story. It's kind of Shakespearean in a way. He starts out at the bottom, poor kid, he gets to the pinnacle of his game. He's right up there with Ty Cobb and different players of his era as being beloved, and people pattern their swings after him like Babe Ruth. And Ty Cobb even said he was the best natural hitter he had ever seen. And so, great player and just so talented. But he grows up in a really poor area of South Carolina. He's born in a place called Pickens County. And later his family, when he's really young, moved to Brandon Mill, South Carolina. And the town itself is named for the textile mill that was there, Brandon Mills. And it was this humongous factory. I believe it was 6 stories tall, had a big smokestack, and it was dirty and grimy, and people worked really hard there, and they were uneducated people. They were hardworking people. They were salt of the earth people, and that was where he grew up. At 6 years old, he went to work in that factory, and the nickname for kids like him were called lint heads. They swept, they pulled bags of cotton or bales of cotton around the place, and so it made him really strong, actually, and he grew into a strong, strapping kid. When he was about 11, he would have been allowed to work on the big machines, but it was extremely dangerous. You could get your clothing caught in it, could drag your arm in there, basically, mangle your arm. You could fall off the top of one of those machines. His brother actually had that happen and broke some bones, so you could get injured. So it was a tough life there, but it's what he had to do to help his family put food on the table. There were 8 kids in his family. He was the oldest, so it kind of fell on him. The other 7, they had some schooling, but he never learned to read or write. So that's a big, humongous part of his story. It plays into everything about who he is as a person. So he starts playing baseball when he's a little kid. It was big in those towns. The different mill towns, there were 11 of them that crescent Greenville, South Carolina there, and they took a lot of pride in their baseball team. So if you could play on one of them teams on Saturdays, when those different mill towns met, it was huge. It was what they did for fun. It was their entertainment. The whole town would show up. They even had a trolley system between the towns, so the other town would show up too. So there would be a lot of people at these games. When he was 13 years old, he was asked to play on the adult team. That's huge. He was tall and lanky. In fact, I didn't look it up before I did this video, but it just popped in my head. In The Glory of Their Times, one of my favorite books, and I know a lot of you guys like it as well. One of the guys, I can't remember who it was exactly, a lot of them talked about Shoeless Joe, and he said he was like Ted Williams. He's kind of tall and lanky. He was known for his long arms. He had huge hands, and he used those levers to his advantage. He was a natural hitter. He used a big old club. So when he was later on in his years, before he went into the minor leagues at 20 years old, one of the people there in town was a woodworker. We believe it might have been the guy that built the grandstands, and he had a lathe, and he turned him a bat, and he named it Black Betsy. And the myth maybe is that he stained it with tobacco juice, but Joe loved his black bat. So it was heavy. It was kind of like you hear about Babe Ruth's bat being really heavy. That's what Joe used. So anyways, Joe swung for the fences, and he hit a lot of long home runs and made a name for himself. When he was 20 years old, he was able to play for the Greenville Spinners, which was the lowest rung of the minor league system. And while there, he had a teammate, Hyder Barr, and he was from the same town right there. And he had made a name as well. And Connie Mack for the Philadelphia Athletics heard about him and sent a scout down. And when the scout gets there, Hyder Barr is really good, but he tells him there's a Joe Jackson kid that he needs to sign too. So he tells him to sign him. And at that time, the minor league team you played for owned your rights. And so he was sold to Connie Mack. And so they had to get him to Philadelphia. So this is in August of 1908. And it's the end of the athletic season, and they have him come to Philadelphia. Well, he jumps the train on the way there and goes back when they make a stop in Charlotte in the middle of the night and goes back to Greenville. The scout that is accompanying him has no idea he's not on the train. He gets to Philadelphia and he's nowhere to be seen. So Joe sends a telegraph and said he decided he didn't want to play. Connie Mack sends his guy back down there. In fact, sends two guys this time. Tells him, you get the whole family. I don't care. Bring them back. Well, Joe had just gotten married to his sweetheart, Katie, and he was homesick, and he was scared to death to go to the big city. He couldn't read or write, none of that stuff, and didn't know how he'd fit in. He fit in great in that mill town. There were a bunch of people like him who weren't educated, couldn't read, couldn't write, and they all just kind of got along. But he was scared, and so anyways, he eventually goes up there. He plays in 5 games at the end of the 1908 season. And then he goes AWOL, goes back again. Now the team turns on him, the press turns on him, and the team kind of gets a bad rep. They kind of, some of these Shoeless Joe books, they talk about him like they're bad guys, and they didn't like him because he was from the South. And sure, he was a little odd. He was different. He couldn't read a menu at a restaurant. He couldn't read the newspaper, all those things. So he was a little different. Connie Mack liked educated guys. He really loved to have college guys on his team that were really smart, and so he probably didn't fit in. But those are the same guys who accepted an American Indian on their team named Chief Bender, and Chief Bender thrived there. But Chief Bender was educated. He went to the Carlisle School of Indians, the same school that Jim Thorpe went to later on. So he had an education. He could read, he could write, he could kind of relate to the guys, even though he was from a different background. So he ends up getting sent to Savannah to minor league system there, and after spring training in 1909, and tears it up, leads the league, and he's a late season call-up again, plays in 5 games, but mainly sits the bench. Connie Mack realizes that he doesn't have any faith he's ever going to be able to play in a northeastern town like that. So the next year, he just sends him to New Orleans to play for the New Orleans Pelicans minor league team again. Again, he goes off, has a fantastic season, and ends up doing his buddy a favor who owned the Cleveland Naps, who later became the Cleveland Indians, and sold him his rights. Joe gets a late season call-up in 1910 and does pretty decent. And this time, I think he realizes that he's going to have to make this work, because if he doesn't, he might have to go back to work in the mills, and he knows he can make a lot more money playing baseball. So he gives it his best shot, does great. 1911, plays his first full season with the Cleveland Naps, and hits 408, which is to this day the record for a rookie as far as batting average. Didn't even win the batting championship. Ty Cobb did by hitting 419. So, in fact, he never won a batting championship. If he would have been in the NL from 1911 to 1920, it was 9 years, he would have won, with the same batting averages in the National League, he would have won 7 titles because he wouldn't have had Ty Cobb in there. So that's kind of his story. Of course, it ends in a tragic way when he accepts money in the Black Sox World Series of 1919 against the Reds. So at the end of this video, I want you guys to let me know, do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? It's appropriate right now to have this video in a way because Pete Rose just passing. And a lot of people are talking about Shoeless Joe and whether he should be in there, and they're talking about Pete Rose and whether he should be in the Hall of Fame. So everybody has their different opinions. I'll kind of share that at the end, what mine is, but I want you to tell me what you think. We're going to look at some cards now. I'm going to talk about the sets, the pop counts, and those kind of things, the rarity of them, and then we'll towards the end kind of talk about the Hall of Fame idea. So anyways, we're going to look at some cards now, so stay tuned. All right, so we're back. Let's look at some cards. First off, showed it to you earlier, is the 1915 Cracker Jack Shoeless Joe. It's one of the trademark cards of the Cracker Jack set. Classic pose, finishing up his swing there. He's playing for the Cleveland, it says Cleveland Americans, but it had been the Cleveland Naps. They weren't yet called the Indians. Napoleon Lajoie was there. He was a big hero of the town and a great player, and they paid homage to him by naming the team after him. This is the back of the card, and as you can see, it's upside down, which tells us immediately that it's a 1915 and not a 1914. It's card 103. Another telltale sign it's a 15 is the paragraph on the bottom. Talks about the fact you could send off one coupon and 25 cents to the Chicago office and get a whole set of cards here, and it would also send you a handsome album, it called it, and you could put all the cards in there. So been pretty cool to be able to do that. As you can see, this was not one of the mailed off cards. It's got the Cracker Jack stains on it. See the stain up there on the top in the corners, and you can see light staining on the back. So it's not a heavily stained card. Some of these cards have a lot of stains. Those Cracker Jacks back then were actually made out of molasses. They had, had popcorn and molasses. So you can see some down there, the J and the O. A lot of times the stains would soak all the way through the cardboard of the card. So that's the Cracker Jack card. As you can see, it's authentic altered. It's must have been trimmed. I bought it in a Leland auction, so I knew this when I bought it, but it was breathtakingly perfect to me. The surface is amazing. It is just really sharp, and it must have been trimmed at the top. Now here's the kicker. I'll stick it back here. The card itself measures out correct, left to right, up and down. It is a heavy 30 seconds short. So it's not like it's trimmed a lot, if it is trimmed at all. Apparently PSA said it's trimmed. But I have a 1914 Cracker Jack tie cob that measures the exact same as this one. So I don't know whether they saw something under the microscope or what. I can't tell because it's in the slab, but that's my Cracker Jack card. The Cracker Jack cards, just so you know, there's 176 cards in the set. There are, out of this card right here, the Shoeless Joe 1915, there is 200 of those graded between PSA and SGC. To put it in perspective, the 1914s are more rare. This one's 200 graded. The 1914s are right around 100. So it's twice as rare as the 15, but still pretty rare. I mean, when there are only 200 of them out there. If this wasn't trimmed of course, if and buts were candy and nuts. If this wasn't trimmed, I'm thinking it's at least a 5, depending on how much they subtract for this light staining. Thought about taking it into SGC and seeing if they'll grade it and it'll get a number, but I'm just leaving it for now. The next card is the 1916 Famous and Bar. This card, as you can tell, has the same image as its sister card in the Cracker Jack set. Black and white picture. The Famous and Bar cards are actually these add back cards. The Famous and Bar is the back of this particular card, as you can see. It was a St. Louis foremost boys clothes store. There were 18 different add backs in this set, and this is the Famous and Bar one. This one is one of the more prevalent. The most prevalent is the blank backs, followed by the Sporting News backs, and then the Famous and Bar backs. Some of the backs you can't hardly find certain players in that particular back. There are 2 different sets, and they're both 200 cards. One is the M1015 and the other is M1014. This is an M1015. How do I know that? Because it is card number 86 down there on the bottom. Let's see if I can get it to focus. There it is, card number 86. The M101 4, it's card number 87. So this card was put out by a publisher in Chicago named Felix Mendelssohn. He also had another set that was bigger cards, and people love those as well. This card in the REA description talked about how it had writing on the back. I don't really see it. I mean, I see it if I look very close, and you can actually see it in the camera almost better than you can see it with your naked eye. It looks almost like it says Amy up here on the top. And then, you can't read it, but it was written in pencil. I don't think it was erased, because if it was, the patina you see there would have been cleaned off. So I don't think that was the case. And then on the bottom of the card, you might have saw it a minute ago when I showed the number. There is a small X that has been erased, and you can see how that cleaned that dirt, that patina, the age off of it when they did that. Again, on a normal everyday, when I pull my cards out of the safe and I look at them and want to enjoy them, I don't see those things at all. In fact, I was working on a trade recently with a guy and was going to put this card in the trade for a 1921 American Caramel Babe Ruth card. And he looked it up on REA and reminded me about the writing. And I had to tell him until I was blue in the face, he believed me, that I wasn't trying to pull something over on him, that I honestly had forgotten it, because I never see it. And honestly, with that card in the pop count, that doesn't bother me at all. There's only 10 of these graded with that back. So that kind of tells you there was a bunch of the YouTubers were doing videos on what's considered scarce and what is actually rare. Some people would say this is scarce. I'm saying it's rare. There's only 10. So that's rare in my book. So anyways, so that's that card. There's the two with the image. I don't really know if we know who took the photograph that the image was done off of. A lot of times in these sets we do know. For example, the Cobb image we know was a Francis Burke image, but we don't know this one. Mendelssohn took some of his own pictures, so it could have been Felix Mendelssohn that took the photograph. We don't know, but as far as I know, it's never turned up. The next card is this awesome card, this 1917 Boston Store card, and this one right here is the most expensive card that I have out of the Joe Jackson run, and I just love it. It's very cool. It's got that, again, that patina to it. The kind of a sepia color, black and white photo of Joe. This is one of his first, well, actually, it's not one of his first. He was playing with the White Sox and the other ones too. But this is one of his White Sox. This is the only one I know of it. He's wearing his black jersey. So with his background, I think it's really cool that it's a black Sox jersey, black Sox. And so let's kind of zoom in on him a little bit here. He's got his White Sox. He's got his cleats on, and he apparently had some pretty small feet. As you can tell, he's not always shoeless. Has the white pinstripe down his pants, has his glove tucked in his back pocket, has Chicago in that classic script across his chest, and his cool hat with the white pinstripe on it. I really love the fact too that he's got the black bat. He was known for his black bats. He loved them. His first black bat, a guy there in his hometown in Greenville, we believe he was the guy that helped build the grandstands around the field there. He was a woodworker, and he turned his first bat for him. And the legend is he made it dark by using tobacco juice, and that was the famous bat called Black Betsy. He broke that bat, we think, starting his rookie year, and then went towards what's now Louisville Sluggers. So as you can see, the back is Boston Store, and believe it or not, Boston Store was headquartered in Chicago. It wasn't in Boston. They had some stores throughout the Midwest and specialized in boys' clothes. So This card right here has a little bit of a crease up in the corner, but other than that, presents really well. This 1917 card, there are 4 different backs. There's Boston Store, there's the Collins McCarthy, and as I tell you this, I'll kind of tell you the pop counts on each. This card right here has been graded 10 times by PSA or SGC. That's it. The next one, the I guess most prevalent one, is the one with the Collins McCarthy back. It's a really cool back. It's the first card that mentions the words Hall of Fame. It's really cool. There's been 20 of the Collins McCarthys graded, and then there's a wheel or bakery card, wheel baking, and there has not been a Shoeless Joe Jackson found in that set. Doesn't mean there's not going to be one, because that happens from time to time. Just recently, a standard biscuit back, which is the 4th back, just showed up. Some people were cleaning out an old home, and it fell out of an old book, and they didn't know if it was real. They just knew it was old, and they took it to a local card shop. They had to send it off to PSA to determine it was real. So there's only one of those graded, but there could be some other ones hanging out that people don't know about. That one recently sold on eBay, of all places, for $75,000. Now that one, again, it had the same front as this one, just had a different back. It said Standard Biscuit on the back and had their logo and stuff. That card sold for $75,000 on eBay, and honest to God, they could have got a whole lot more than that, but they didn't send it to an auction house. The guy who bought that card reached out to me and told me, because I posted on my Instagram story, and told me he's the one that bought it. He has an insane collection. He has the old meal card. He has Boston News Babe Ruth card. So that card he bought on eBay isn't even his biggest one, but he said he was prepared to go up $125,000 on it, but never got the chance. So I feel bad for the people that sold it. This set right here had 200 cards in it. There was also in 1921 a Wholesome Bread set. So same face of the card, just had a Wholesome Bread ad on the back. The next card I'm going to show is this 1913 Tom Barker game card. This is the oldest one out of the 5. Obviously, it's 1913. There's 78 of these been graded. There's also another set with the exact same fronts but a different back. And it is the National Game set. And instead of Tom Barker, it says National Game. It has a different design on it as well. These cards are thick stock. They have the rounded corners. So you can find these in pretty pristine. You can find them in 8s. This one is only a 1, as you can tell. It got wet in the deck, apparently, and the red card that was sitting on top of it bled onto the face. It doesn't bother me. I just like having the card the way it is. It's a great picture of Joe. Got his hat cocked on sideways. These cards, I'm not really sure how the game was played, but they have different results on 3 sides. But very cool card. This is a great entry-level card for anybody that wants a Playing Days Shoeless Joe Jackson card. They're expensive, but they're not quite as expensive. In that set, there's 54 cards, just like in a deck of cards. So that's that card. The final card is one a lot of people don't like the look of, but I think it's pretty cool. Especially, I'm going to show you in a minute how it was made. But this one right here is the W514 strip card. These were made and distributed between 1919 and 1921. There were 100 cards in that set. And this card, just again, I've been telling you pop counts. I think that's interesting. It is to me. There's been 113 of these graded. Has a cardboard back, just plain back. So a lot of these are graded authentic because they're miscut. So on these strip cards, I'm going to try to zoom in right here. There is a dotted line that runs down the side, and that was where you were supposed to cut it. So if the grading companies can't see that dotted line, or it's not close, so you can see part of it right there on the bottom right. They're going to deem it miscut. They're a little bit more lenient on stuff like that on these pre-award cards, and that. So surprised it got a 3 with the corner nicked off, but it did. And it doesn't really matter. It's a really pretty card, no creases. Anyways, when I jumped back in the hobby, I really hadn't gone down the pre-war rabbit hole yet. And after I did, I really loved it. It was new and exciting for me. I already knew all the 1950s and 60s cards, but cards like this, I just thought some artist drew that card. I had no idea that was actually a photo. That is a Charles Conlon image. If you're familiar with him, to me, he's the greatest baseball photographer all time. That's a Charles Conlon image. I bought this card at the National in Cleveland this summer, and the booth, I can't remember the guy's name who sold it to me, said he had a really cool magazine that I might be interested in too, that had that card image in it. I mean, it was actually the photo the card was made off of. So he showed me the magazine, and oh my goodness, I wanted it too. So I bought it with the card, and here's the magazine. And I'm gonna stop the video for a minute, and then I'll show you the magazine and the photo inside. All right, so here's the magazine. What this magazine is, this was a really well-distributed periodical back in the day in the teens and 20s called Baseball Magazine, of all things. This magazine was put out to kind of talk about the World Series in 1919. The whole magazine pretty much is featuring the Cincinnati Reds and the Chicago White Sox. Now, the White Sox were favored to win the World Series that year. A lot of people thought it was a done deal. And but anyways, what's cool about this, has a lot of images in here. Pretty sure pretty much all of these are Charles Conlon images. Kind of talks about the matchup. Has a little John McGraw in here talking about his World Series. Anyways, goes through, has some really cool articles. But the really awesome thing that caught my eye and what he wanted me to see was the centerfold, if I can find that. Here we go. So the centerfold of the magazine here, and you've got Kid Gleason, the manager of the White Sox, in the center, and you've got Pat Moran, the manager of the Reds, in the center over here, surrounded by his team. And then we got the White Sox. So upper row, left to right, we got Buck Weaver, Risberg, Collins, Gandil. Of course, Chick Gandil was one of the main conspirators to come up with the plot to throw the World Series. You got Joe Jackson and Happy Felch, Leibold. You've got Ray Schalk, the catcher. You got Williams, Kerr, and Fowler, and Saccott. So those are all the White Sox. So, but what was cool was this right here. The card image matches the Conlon image in the magazine. So kind of blow that up a little bit, bring it down so you can see it better. Very cool. You can see how they had to manipulate the Sox logo to get it on the card image, make it smaller. He's got his hat cocked back, and you can see the likeness there and realize that is indeed the same image. I'm going to show the image of the card, and also while I was there and I bought this, he said that he had I don't know where he got it, somebody had sent it to him about this particular card and how this strip card was made, and I found that really interesting. So it kind of shows the steps that the artist would have done to create this card, and you can see it going from a black and white photo into this colored illustration of a card. So I'll do that next and be right back. So you can see the original Charles Conlon image here. In my opinion, he's the greatest baseball photographer of all time. He captures the expression on their face and the time period so well. And right here, you can see where someone would have shadowed in spots and then illustrated it and eventually colored the picture, and it ends up being the strip card. So that's how the sausage is made. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed looking at those cards. There's some of my favorite cards. I've got a lot of vintage cards, and in fact, if you want to see some of my cards, you can go on my Instagram page. It's Southern Collector 14 is my Instagram name. Go on there, you'll see kind of what I do there as far as showing the history of the cards and do little write-ups on some of them, but enjoy doing that. That's what I plan on doing with my channel, just doing it in YouTube form. So, Shoeless Joe. He's kind of, like I said, a tragic figure. One of the greatest players in baseball history. Fourth all time in batting average with a .356 batting average. Had a cannon for an arm. He would win skills competitions and with other major leaguers. He could throw a baseball from a 400-foot fence all the way to home plate on a fly and win the long toss competition. So he was fast. Anyways, in 1920, a lot of people don't know this, but in 1919, they threw the World Series. In 1920, he played most of the season. It was hitting in the 380s when they finally kicked him out. And when Kennesaw Mountain Landis did that, kicked him out, and he was having not a career year because he had 2 seasons where he had a higher batting average, but he was starting to blossom. He was in the prime. I mean, he was in his early 30s. There's no telling what he could have done if he could have played out the string. So it is very tragic. Now, comparing him and Pete Rose are 2 different things. Pete Rose, he bet on baseball. I mean, we all know that. Now, he did sign the paper with Bart Giamatti saying he didn't, but it's pretty much an understood thing he did. He got banned because he was walking a thin line where things could go downhill fast. Being a manager especially, he could overpitch his pitchers trying to win that game because he had money on it, and then mess them up from making the playoffs because he overpitched his pitchers. If he didn't bet on a game one day, that would tell the bookies, hey, let's bet whoever the Reds are playing, let's bet for them, because if Pete ain't playing, he doesn't have a good feeling about this. And then there's always the risk that, you get behind paying your bookie and then they start putting the screws to you, and then you're kind of forced into throwing games. So we don't know if any of that ever happened with him, but that was the thin line he was treading. And that's why in every clubhouse in Major League Baseball, there's one rule on the wall, and that is no betting on baseball. And every player knows it. It's in every clubhouse from rookie league to single A, double A, triple A, all the way to the major leagues. As many years as Pete spent in professional baseball, he had to have read that sign 20,000 times. He understood the consequences if he broke it, and he did it anyway. So, whether or not he gets in, that's not up to me, but he knew the risks and he took it and he failed. So I feel bad for him not getting in before he died. I really do. Now, as far as Shoeless Joe, he accepted $5,000. I mean, he admitted to that, and Chick Gandil gave it to him in a hotel room. So not only did he accept it, he agreed to throw the games, and he had knowledge of it. Buck Weaver, he had knowledge of it. He never accepted a dime, and Kennesaw Mountain Landis banned him just for knowledge and basically made an example of him, because up to then you had people like Hal Chase who would openly throw games and got found out and didn't get kicked out. And that was the year before 1919. Christy Mathewson's the one that actually turned him in. And then John McGraw turns around and hires him and signs him to play for his team with the New York Giants. So, it was kind of a thing where people turned their heads. So in reality, in my opinion, Shoeless Joe shouldn't get in. But here's the thing. he's more famous for not being in the Hall of Fame than he is if he were to had a great career and been a regular everyday Hall of Famer. He had a cool nickname, but he would have been Jimmy Fox. You know, Jimmy Fox was a great player. I mean, he's one of the greatest players of all time, but you know, he doesn't get the due he really deserves. And maybe Shoeless Joe would have had the same history there if he would have played out the string. Who knows? But now, you know, he's always being talked about. He's being collected and all that kind of stuff. So that's my take on it. Share with me what you think, what your observations are of the cards. If you got any questions about them, if you want to tell me about your cards you have or anything like that, give me your opinion on whether Shoeless Joe and Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. There's really no right or wrong answer. It's opinion. So share that with me as well. I'll be doing some more videos. Not sure if I'll get one a week. I plan on having some pretty fun guests on. And so thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.